The goal of gain staging is to capture the highest quality recording possible and then to maintain that quality and resolution through every step of the signal chain until it reaches your listener's ears. Take a look at these images. This is a visual analogy of good gain staging versus bad gain staging. Which do you want to present to your audience? And how do you do it? Let's take a look. Bad gain staging on the too hot side of things is going to be full of clipping and distortion and tonal imbalance, and that sounds like this. This is an example of bad gain staging. Yeah, that sounds deep fried. Bad gain staging on the quiet side of things is going to have a loss of detail and resolution, and it's going to have a much higher noise floor. That sounds like this. And this is also an example of bad gain staging. Yeah, it sounds like listening to a shell and hearing the ocean. Now, good gain staging is not going to have any of those problems, and it's going to sound crystal clear. That sounds like this. And this is what you want to hear with proper gain staging. This all really boils down to the concept of gain. So what is gain? You might be tempted to think of gain as volume, but don't, because it's not. Volume is a term that's really reserved for the final playback levels after everything, after the mixdown. Let the consumer worry about their playback levels and just think of gain like this. Gain is the input level, and volume is the output level after all of the different little signal chains and gain stages. So on the music production side of things, gain is going to be the level of the signal as it goes through the signal path, starting with my voice, and then this microphone, and then the preamp, EQ, compressor, and then the converters. And every time we hit an amplifier, that's a gain stage. So this could be a trim knob, a gain knob, input and output controls on a plug-in or a piece of hardware, your faders, or even the volume knob on an instrument. Every gain stage is a chance to reset the gain and the level of the signal to the most optimal level for the next piece of gear. So why does gain matter? There's 4 reasons we concern ourselves with gain. The first is signal matching. When you're recording a voice or an instrument with a microphone, that's coming in at mic level, and that's measured in millivolts. And it needs to get boosted up to line level, which is about 1.25 volts, and that's about 1,000 times boost in gain. We need to do the same thing with instruments, so we might record that through a direct injection followed up by a preamp, and we need to boost that level by about 10x. And so the main point is mic level and instrument level need to come up to line level because that's what all the other gear is expecting. So number 2, we want to avoid clipping. In the analog world, all this circuitry has a voltage ceiling, and if you hit that, now we're talking about soft clipping and even saturation and pleasing warm harmonics. But if you go too far, then we're talking about hard clip distortion. And thankfully, in this analog realm, we've got a lot more wiggle room than we do in the digital world. In the digital world, there's a very hard ceiling, and if your waveform goes past it, that's just getting chopped off and turned into a square-shaped waveform. And we all know how bad that hard-clipped square waveform sounds. That's straight-up distortion. So the problem is, we're often recording sounds with an unpredictable dynamic range with parts that are just much louder than the rest of it. And we've got to preserve some of this voltage for those transients. But at the same time, we need to use as much of that headroom as possible so we maintain a good signal-to-noise ratio, which leads us to number 3, noise reduction. This is where preamplifiers come into play with their special task. Because what happens is, a beginner buys a microphone and then they plug it straight into the line level input on their sound card, and then they discover every gain stage has its own noise floor. So they boost the volume way up, and that little mic signal has to get turned up 1,000 times to get to the line level. Well, they've turned up the noise floor of that gain stage by 1,000 times too. This is why we need a preamplifier, which are specially designed to have an incredibly low self-generated noise floor. This is why it can boost a mic signal up 1,000 times and you don't get all this extra noise. But this is also why it's important for us to be close enough to our microphones or to close mic an instrument. It's not just to block out room ambience, it's to keep a high signal over a low noise floor so you get a good signal to noise ratio. And 4 is we want to hit the sweet spot. Every piece of analog gear and their digital plug-in simulations all have an expected input gain level, and this is where they're engineered and calibrated to have their sweet spot where all of their components produce the most pleasing and purposefully clean audio. Some gear you can get coloration and flavor and saturation out of if you drive them harder, but that's not what we're worried about here. What our concern is getting high fidelity audio and maintaining that quality throughout the whole signal chain. And thankfully for us, all of this gear is designed to have the exact same sweet spot in terms of gain levels. So what's our goal here? We want to avoid clipping on the distortion ceiling. We want to maintain a high signal well above the noise floor. And when we hit the analog to digital converters, we want to fill every bit with as much data as possible. So what is gain staging in a nutshell? Gain staging is the process of setting each gain stage to the proper levels to achieve the highest signal to noise ratio with no distortion or clipping at the best resolution possible. So then the question becomes, what's the proper level of input at each gain stage? What is the sweet spot? This is the fun part because it would have been way hard with all these different units of decibels and the conversions between them, but thankfully, really smart engineers have already done all the work for us. Now, as far as gain staging is concerned, in the analog realm, we're going to be using dBVU, which is decibels volume unit. This is what you see on your outboard gear. Like me here on the screen, that's my voice causing the lights to bounce. And if you look at the preamp on the left, the green lights, I've got all this room well above 0 dBVU, but that's my target. We do have headroom, a lot more in analog. In the digital realm, we're using dBFS, or decibels full scale. And this is what you see on your faders and your master output in your DAW. Notice here that 0 decibels full scale is your maximum. You can't go over it, or you just clip off the top of your waveforms. So here's what you need to know, and I'm even going to pop a graphic on screen. With some of these decibel units, there's no conversion possible, but that's overcome by calibration. So we can say, like in the analog realm, plus 24 dBVU is equal to 0 dBFS, so that's clipping in analog and digital, respectively. And we can also say the noise floor is like negative 62 dBVU and negative 80 dBFS in digital. That's super low, and you'll achieve that if you're doing proper gain staging. Now, the number we want to remember, the magic sweet spot, is 0 dBVU equals negative 18 dBFS. That's the sweet spot, and in the digital realm, that gives us 18 decibels of headroom for transients and all this. That's the number we want to hit, but how do we make sure we're achieving this? So here in the DAW, what we're going to do is we're going to take the armed track that's ready to record the incoming audio we're concerned about, and we're going to make sure the fader is at unity. It's set to 0 so that it can't influence the gain of this incoming recording, and we can monitor it in decibels full scale right there on the track. Hey, this is Jared from the future, and you're about to get another example of good versus bad gain staging, because you'll see me bypass the compressor and all of a sudden the gain gets way loud, and I'll zoom in and show you the makeup gain on the compressor is at negative 16 because the input on this camera is so hot I'm coming out of the compressor into the camera, so that's why the gain boosts by 16 decibels, and all of a sudden I'm peaking. So you're going to hear that, and I'll have it on screen. You'll see good versus bad. Back to it. The next thing we need to do is go to our outboard signal chain and make sure every piece of gear after the preamp is in bypass mode, like this compressor. The lights are still bouncing, but it's not recording or influencing the signal. And now we can look at the LEDs on the preamp and make sure we're bouncing around 0 dB VU, which I can see that we are. Now, if you aren't, you're going to increase or lower your gain, or you're going to tweak your trim until you're dancing at 0 dB VU. And if you don't have LEDs and meters on your gear, watch in the DAW and make sure it's dancing around -18 decibels full scale. Then, if I had a bypass on the EQ, which they don't because they don't mess up the gain that much, I would unbypass it. And then I'm hitting up the compressor. I'm turning that back on. It doesn't have a gain meter on it, but it has a gain reduction meter. And I'm compressing upwards to 12 to 16 decibels, depending on how close I am to this mic. And I can use that to go to this bottom knob, and I can add makeup gain. So I'm trying to return the signal back to 0 dB VU at every single gain stage, which is every piece of gear. And once I've got it dialed in at this compressor, which is the last thing, it's going to run over to my interface and hit the analog to digital converters at the perfect level. If you only have an interface and its built-in preamps, you probably can't really tell where the level is. Like this Focusrite Scarlett, it's got XLR jacks that feed the preamp, but it's only got an LED ring on it. So go back to your DAW like I showed you before. So once we're in the box, it's the same procedure. We want every gain stage to receive its signal in the sweet spot of now -18 decibels full scale. So look at this little audio clip I recorded. I'm looping it. And look at our fader. We're dancing around -18 decibels. Perfect. So let's say we want to do some EQ now. We know it's being fed -18. Let's turn it on. And let's just say for whatever reason, we want to whack out a whole bunch of this mid-range. Well, now let's look back at our fader. Because the fader is coming after the plugin so we can get a good read. We're dancing around -28. So let's say we need to add 10 decibels back with the output gain on this EQ. So we'll just push it up to about 10. And, well, it'd be cool if I could read. Then we'll go back to the fader. Look, we're back to dancing around -18. Perfect. That means this compressor is going to be being fed in the sweet spot. Let's turn it on. I've already got some stuff set up, and we're compressing at a gain reduction amount of about average 5 decibels. So now, to bring that back to the sweet spot, on the output, we'll go to our makeup gain, and we'll just add 5 decibels again. Now we can look at this input meter, and we look at this output meter, and they appear to be very close to the same. Perfect. So now we're ready for any more plugins, or we just come back to the fader. Yeah, we're dancing at -18. And when we're ready to mix, our faders are at unity. So we're not stuck down here at the bottom where we can only make half decibel decisions. We're way up here where we can get some resolution to our choices, granularity. I can go 0.1 at a time. This is the benefit of proper gain staging. We now have the highest quality recording. We've done all the highest quality signal processing. And now that we've hit the fader and we're ready to balance levels, we've maintained the highest quality possible. One thing to note here is we're starting in analog where we're talking about dBVU, and that's a measure of loudness. And so that's an average. So we're not talking about peaks. In the digital world with dBFS, yeah, all the meters are showing you peak information because there's a hard ceiling. But that's why I'm talking about we're dancing around -18 dBFS. I'm not talking about where the peak is tapping. I'm talking about where are we dancing around? Where's the average? As a final tip, if you record in at 24-bit or 32-bit instead of 16-bit, you're going to get a much larger dynamic range, a much higher amount of headroom, and you're going to get more resolution at lower volumes, and the DSP noise floor is going to be insanely low, like at the converter, So much so that it's going to be lower than your mic and your preamp. And you may be thinking, okay, big deal then. Well, the headroom is a huge deal. It keeps you from clipping, as does coming in with an outboard compressor. Follow these guidelines and your gain staging should be perfect. You'll enjoy more detail in your recordings with no distortion, no clipping, and an imperceptibly low noise floor. And this means a clear mix. If you want another way to clear up your mix and improve your reverb workflow, check out this video right here. I'm going to show you the most common beginner mistakes, how to fix them, what to do instead so that you can slather on the secret sauce that you couldn't have otherwise. I'm going to catch you over there.